Before we get started, there are only a few here. Go ahead, Valerie.
Five seconds. Live.
Good evening, everyone. We are now calling to order the regular city council meeting. It's Monday, June 1st. And we will begin with Leslie, would you please call roll, and then we will send the pledge of allegiance and the invocation.
Yes, ma'am. Councilman Slater?
Here.
Councilman Adair?
Here.
Councilman Torgerson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nail?
Here.
And Mayor Fitch?
Here.
Please stand for the invocation and pledge. Les Coates, President of the Board, that the business conducted here this evening will be for the continued betterment of our city. And in keeping with our commandments, we ask in God's name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, at this time, I will have a statement that is pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020. Municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided by section 120, period 545B2, Florida statutes, for members of the council appearing remotely and for public participation. While a quorum of council members are physically present for this meeting, along with a minimal number of key staff, we are following the governor's emergency orders and the city's emergency declarations by having less than 10 people physically present, and we are maintaining a distance of 6 feet between people and following other CDC guidelines for social distancing and protection. I'd now like to ask the city attorney to explain the procedures for public comment and participation in this meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Following are the rules for utilizing communications media technology as adopted by the city and provided for by section 120.545B2 Florida statutes. These were adopted on April 6, 2020. This meeting is being streamed on YouTube Live and on the city's Facebook page. The agenda and backup material and the agenda packet are posted on the city's website as usual. As set forth in the notice for this meeting that was also posted last week, members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting were asked to review the agenda and submit questions or comments on agenda items by email to the city clerk with their name and address and a reference to the agenda item on which they wish to comment. It was also explained in the notice that questions or comments on agenda items could be mailed directly to the city clerk's attention at the City of Gulf Breeze City Hall, 1070 Shoreline Drive, Gulf Breeze, Florida 32561. The city requested that all correspondence be received by 4 p.m. Central Standard Time today, June 1st. As we go through the agenda during this meeting tonight, the mayor will ask for public comment on the agenda item as usual. And at that point in the meeting, the clerk will read the questions or comments submitted, and the mayor and council members will then respond as if comments were being made in person. If there are follow-up comments or questions, or if others wish to be heard, those comments should be made through YouTube Live by providing your name, address, and question or comment in the chat box, and then your questions will be read by the clerk and responded to by the council. Anyone who would like to participate during the public forum at the end of the meeting should also comment on YouTube Live with your name, address, and question or comment. Standard rules of procedure applied, with comments being limited to 3 minutes, and if on an agenda topic, that the comments be applicable to the particular agenda topic being considered. Any questions?
All right, thank you. At this time, we will call for approval for the May 18th, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Leslie, have you received any questions or comments from the public? All right, do we have a motion and a second?
Move to approve. Second.
All All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. All right, next we will have, a very special event, and that's the swearing in of Leslie Geyer. Our city clerk is the FACC Northwest Florida District Director. So, I'll first tell you what the FACC is, because, we're very proud of Leslie. The Florida Association of City Clerks, FACC, is governed by an 11-member board of directors composed of the executive board and 7 district directors. The board sets policy and provides organizational leadership and guidance. The FACC has 7 districts covering every county in Florida. Leslie will be taking office as the Northwest Florida District Director. The Northwest Florida District is comprised of 16 counties with 44 cities, towns, and villages. Leslie is the city clerk of the city of Gulf Breeze and has served in this position for 7 years. Prior to her appointment as city clerk in 2013, she served as deputy city clerk for 5 years. She received the designation of certified municipal clerk in September of 2017 and is actively pursuing her master municipal clerk designation. As an active member of Florida Association of City Clerks since 2013, Leslie is currently serving on the FACC nominating committee and previously has served on the 2016 nominating committee. So at this time, I'd like for Leslie to step down so I can swear her in. All right, Leslie, raise your right hand. You have been duly elected by your fellow members to represent them as district director, serving as the liaison between the Florida Association of City Clerks and the city clerks in our district. You are charged with the responsibility to assist in the business of this association and to conscientiously perform other duties that may be delegated to you. Do you accept the responsibility? I declare you duly installed as the district director of Florida Association of City Clerks. Congratulations, Leslie. We're very proud of you, and we know that you will be the best one ever. So
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
All right, at this time, we will move on to our financial reports for the second quarter. Samantha, if you want to move us along on that?
Yep, we're going to call our finance director, Jean Griffin, just to give a very brief recap of her budget memo. And just remind the council that at your last meeting, you approved your quarterly budget amendments. This is your second quarter financial report. And look at the percentage of year-to-date as Jean expressed in her memo. There isn't anything that is out of the ordinary, and we wouldn't expect it to be otherwise after the second quarter. But she'll take us through a little bit more in depth. Jean, are you there?
Jean?
Oh, hold on, we need to adjust the volume.
Gotta get you loud and proud.
Okay.
All right, we're good now, Jean.
Okay. Jean, do you have any observations or thoughts on the budget, things you would like to bring to the mayor and council's attention before we turn it over to them to ask any questions they may have on the budget materials?
Jean, could you hear Samantha?
Jean, can you hear us?
I'm having a hard time hearing on my end.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Let's just make it simple and say mayor and council. Do you have
Yeah,
any?
Go ahead.
Why don't- can she- I don't think she can hear us. Why don't we just disconnect, and then if we have any questions, we can try to call her back. So I'll just give a brief review, and that is, of course, that the city has received 95% of the total ad valorem taxes through the end of the second quarter. As you can see from the, attachment, as it relates to overall, revenues for the city's water and sewer fund. There is a deficit related to, pump replacements in the city's water and sewer fund. There is not a reserve, there has not been a rate adjustment in the water and sewer fund since 2014. That is always a discussion every budget, and so when the unexpected happens, it's typical that there is a deficit, and you will be, of course, looking to do a future budget amendment, where you'll be using general fund dollars. Unfortunately, that isn't out of the ordinary from years past, but that is, unfortunately what, has to occur with such a skinny budget. The overall revenues are 43% of the total budget, overall expenditures are 48%. Natural gas fund is, meeting its projections. There's a surplus of 43% of the budget and spending at 39% of the budget for, the second quarter, of this year. I'm not going through all the funds, but South Santa Rosa Utility is at a break-even status at the end of the second quarter. Approximately 50% of budgeted reserves, have been utilized, as planned. Solid Waste Fund has received 46% of budgeted revenues and has expended about 40%. That's just some highlights from some of your, enterprises, but all in all, as we discussed with the pandemic, we're being mindful, of our budget. The city does have an emergency fund that it utilizes, hopefully very rarely, but it has in this case. And so, one of the things you'll be talking about later on in the agenda is the city's phased reopening plan. But, hopefully we don't expect to exceed, the salaries for that emergency budget for your general fund. And so with that, happy to answer any questions, and if you have anything in particular, we can try to call Gene back.
Does this basically fall the way it typically does at this time of year? Does this look like normal?
Yes, it does, and that's what Jean shared in her comments, that there isn't anything, of course, other than the pandemic. We do have, increased overtime in our enterprise funds, South Santa Rosa Utility, we're all aware of that, as well as our, water and sewer fund. But because this is a second quarter report, it will be more towards the third quarter before we can determine whether the revenues will pay for that exceedance in overtime. So we're continuing to monitor that.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, hearing none, do we have anything from the public? All right, do we have a motion to accept? We have a motion and a second. With no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, passes 5-0. All right, now we will move on to ordinances. And, Leslie, would you please read ordinance 01-2020?
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance number 01-2020. An ordinance of the city of Gulf Breeze, Florida, amending the retirement plan and trust for the police officers of the city of Gulf Breeze, providing for severability of provisions, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, and providing for an effective date.
All right, thank you. Samantha, do you have info for us?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. On May 18th, the City Council heard the presentation from the City Attorney, Mary Jane Bass, and voted unanimously to approve the ordinance on first reading, adding a new section O to the City of Gulf Breeze, Florida Municipal Pension Trust Fund Defined Benefit Plan. There have been no changes from first reading, and so the staff would recommend approval and adoption and authorizing the mayor to sign upon second reading this evening.
All right, thank you. Leslie, have we had any public input on this?
Having not received any.
All right, council, do we have a motion and a second?
Move for approval. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion by council? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Thank you. At this time, we will move to resolution number 32-20. Samantha?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, at the last meeting, you asked that are,
Sam, I think we're on the red light.
the red light.
We could skip that.
Page 23.
Page 20.
Thank you.
Huh.
One page.
My papers got stuck together. Forgive me. The recommendation here is that the council designate the city clerk and red light camera clerk to serve as the clerk to the local red light camera hearing officer. I'm happy to answer any questions. The red light camera clerk is a part-time position. This has been a recent hire, and we have been well pleased. Chief Hawthorne has really had great things to say. The red light camera clerk's hours will be adjusted, as needed for her to be able to attend the hearing. And so obviously that assists our city clerk, so. Can answer your question.
So then is Leslie basically kind of like the backup for the
Yes.
other, okay, all right. One, maybe Leslie. All right, have we had any public input? Questions? All right, council, do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion from council? All right, hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right. Next, we will move on to resolution number 33-2020, and that is relative to the reopening of the community center and other public facilities.
This one I have flagged. See what happens when I don't have it in my notes. Gotta go digging. Yeah, right. So I'm gonna turn your attention to the resolution as attached to the Exhibit A. If the council approves the recreation and public facilities reopening plan, then this will be turned around into a press release, which will go out to members of the public. Just want to remind you that our reopening plan is limited to the governor's reopening plan and those executive orders. And so that means that when the governor announces phase 2, it will be to allow gatherings of 50 or less. Currently, we are by law limited to gatherings of 10 or less. As that relates to summer camps and recreation, programs, we see that those are opening back up. There is still an expectation that the local governments continue to ensure maintaining CDC social distancing. And so I shared with you at the last meeting that I would need to sit with staff and make sure that we are providing our employees with proper equipment and proper training, and that we have sufficient staffing for whatever reopening plan we put in place. And we think that this does exactly that. We looked at all scenarios. Mary Jane was extremely helpful talking with Pensacola and other regional areas to look at how they were planning their phased reopening. Some measures that we're looking at include a survey questioning children and adults as they're entering public facilities, non-contact temperature measures, and the sort. As it relates to City Hall, upon approval, starting tomorrow, we will have a volunteer firefighter who will be up front at the desk, who will be welcoming members of the public, requiring that they stay in the lobby, and also utilizing a non-contact thermometer. These non-contact thermometers have been in use by churches in this area where we're St. Anne's is, and we're grateful for that kind of technology that is unobtrusive. We will meet members of the public in the lobby in order to provide that customer service. We will be limiting them to that area. They won't be coming back further into the facility, just so that we continue to keep our janitorial, services, just ensuring to the maximum extent possible that we're desanitizing everything. As it relates to the recreation center, effective tomorrow upon the city council's execution of this resolution, the community center would open from 1 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 6 p.m. Saturday, 12 to 6 p.m. Sunday for free play activities only. There will be a volunteer firefighter who again will be staged between the two doors. No one will be able to, gain entrance until they also have a non-contact thermometer reading and they need to just sign in. We won't be doing any type of a, survey. When we started looking at record keeping and just the ages of people who enjoy our community center, that became very problematic. But we do ask for people to sign in, if ultimately, we were to have some, community spread, we would want to look at that list and be able to notify members of our public. And so that's out of, courtesy, to our public that we're asking for that list. Again, we're gonna allow free play activity, which will include basketball, volleyball, pickleball, youth and adults. We know that we can provide adequate staffing between these hours. Group reservations, organized fee for service programming such as jazzercise, fitness, classes, et cetera, will not be permitted until phase 3. Outdoor facility rental, playgrounds, splash pad concessions, and et cetera, will continue to remain closed. Again, will not be allowed until phase 3. Park monitoring, and gate attendance activities by service workers will be reduced in order to provide the staffing back at the rec center. So Councilman Torgerson had asked at the last meeting, for how much longer are we going to be providing park monitors for social distancing? Those park monitors will go back to their, primary positions, which will either be park maintenance or the rec center, which means that our police now will be providing more of the monitoring for the CDC social distancing. Our parks employees will continue to do that, but you won't have that monitor, for, 4 to 7 hours at a time. Subject to the governor's declaration of phase 2 in the future, we're also asking that summer camp begin on July 1st. That will be a reduced, 6-week program. It will run from 7:30 to 5:30, which means that in order to limit the potential for contact and also ensure that we're meeting the governor's, limitation of groups of 50 or less, within those hours of 7:30 to 5:30, we would no longer have free play. So starting July, free play would be from 5:30 to 9. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. The members of the public affected tomorrow would be able to have free play from 1 until 9, but in order to accommodate the summer camp come July 1, and also still meet the governor's executive order, for phase 2, the free play would then be reduced, until 5:30 to 9 come July 1. Outdoor facility rentals with reservations, playgrounds, concessions, and park restrooms will reopen upon the governor's announcement of phase 2. And then also limited special event permitting will resume for all city-controlled public property and events with less than 50. And specifically, we've had requests from parents, for instance, that their graduates from middle school or high school be allowed to have a vehicle parade. Our code of ordinance specifically says that a parade requires a special event permit, and so we've not been able to facilitate that. But for something where we feel that it is limited, they will be in vehicles, there will not be a large group, congregating. At the announcement of phase 2, this may be a time where the city would consider each one of those on a case-to-case basis. Phase 3 is essentially when most things return to near normal. The community center returns to pre-pandemic operations and programming. Splash pad will resume. Special events and tournaments and the special event permitting for all city-controlled public property and events requiring city services will resume. Group reservations and organized fees for services such as jazzercise, fitness classes would resume. And so those are, again, the 3 phases that follow the governor's, limitations for group sizes, and also requiring local governments to adhere to those CDC social distancing recommendations. And upon approval, this will be formulated into a press release to go out effective tonight.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
In phase 2, I'm sorry, will we be back into a normal council meeting setting at that point?
The governor's order has been very explicit about local government meetings, and so I would imagine, again, he will specifically call out when you would be able to reconvene.
Right, and right now, you're still allowed to meet as we've been meeting. You could even be doing it with everyone participating in the community council remotely at this point. He has not pulled back on that. And if at any point he says, whatever point I should say, he determines that it's no longer, the council has to have physical quorum present, which is the statutory requirement, then, we would be mandated to continue to meet like we've been doing. There's some suggestion, though, that he might do that, but still allow public participation through the communications media technology, because, and we're a good example, it's, and even, if we had a crowd show up, we don't have room to social distance here, depending on how many people do show up, so there's some suggestion, and again, he's not making any changes, any decisions at this point, but there's some suggestion that, he might, allow or require the quorum to be physically present of the council, but still allow municipalities and local governments to use some discretion in terms of, their, the public participation. Of course, all meetings have to be open in some way, and so, we kind of have done the middle ground of continuing to meet with the physical forum present, but, providing for the physical, public participation through the communications media. And so again, we just kind of have to take that one step at a time. He hasn't addressed it or even said, whether it would come in phase 2 or phase 3 or what, at what point we might change it. But there does seem to be a recognition that, there's just there are a lot of differences in, the ability depending on the size of your chamber and other considerations. So, we'll keep you informed as to developments.
Thanks.
Have you heard, any indication or, I guess, projection of when phase 3 might come into being?
Only by looking at the plan, and it simply says that phase 3 is when the likelihood of a resurgence, is reduced unlikely. So I think with phase 2, the more holidays we have, the more big events that happen, and there isn't a surge, that would kind of indicate when the governor would feel comfortable with phase 3. I can just tell you, I've talked to local legislators, and the state legislature does not know. This is the governor, his advisors, and they let us know.
Thank you.
I would have thought we would have been in phase 2 by now, if possible.
And,
I didn't realize it was gonna be the July.
right. And we're told that it could, happen at any time, but we don't know.
So, who decided these different things, like, for example, Jazzercise or the boot camp and everything, they came to be, it's a huge gym, you got 8 people in there working out, they're definitely, distance apart, who made this decision on all this?
Well,
Is that you and Ron that made this, or is it?
It's my recommendation to you, but as it relates to all level of service, if you were to say to me, Samantha, we're gonna open everything back up, I'm gonna turn around and look at you and say, given the resources we have, it's not possible. I can tell you that we have been pushing very hard for part-time and full-time employees. We are competing with federal stimulus right now. And so we're constrained by our own vulnerable population who continue to work remotely if they can. We're constrained by the limited staff that we have. And so this is what we're able to do, one, with our staff resources, but two, also ensuring that we're able to, between free play and, throughout the day, that we're disinfecting the place. And then in July, between summer camp and free play, disinfecting all areas in between those periods of time. So definitely looking at what other groups are doing. For instance, when summer camp is proposed to start from 7:30 to 5:30, other cities are providing a questionnaire to the children. Well, we thought about how long it would take if you're doing a 3-minute questionnaire with each child, and we run typically about 165 children. Well, it's gonna take a very long time to get through the door, and the parent would not be able to leave them before they got through the door. And so if you were to then just reduce that capacity by half, how do you pick? Are you gonna have a lottery for which children get to go and which don't, and how does that go with the message of what we have always said about the recreation center? So what we try to do here is, it's number one, prioritize the value of our rec center, which has always been that it is open to the public, that we not exclude certain people, and that number one, it be available for free play. That has been the same value for basketball, for volleyball, for tennis, is number one, it's available for free play. And then if facilities are available, then you can, utilize it for private lessons. And so that was how we went about, based on how council has kind of set the precedent with, policies in the past. If, for phase one, the challenge would be the fact that we are limited to groups of 10 or less right now. And so if you wanted to allow vendors, such as your jazzercise instructor, then that means that your seniors will not be able to just come in and do a pickup, card game, if there's also people doing free play. I mean, you have to limit it in some way, so we limited it by saying, the city's gonna pick up the tab, we're gonna pay the light bill, we're gonna pay for the AC and make sure it's available for free play, but that means those who are using the center for a profit are going to have to wait until a later phase.
So basically, the ones that have to do it for profit are having to wait for the next phase.
Yes.
So it sounds to me like it's more of a personnel issue than anything from people power.
It isn't more than anything, it really has to do with the governor's order more than anything, because if this were lifted, and the pandemic were lifted, we would be able, and people weren't receiving more of a stimulus to stay home.
Right, but that's the big problem, is that
Yeah.
they're getting $8.50 a week to stay home versus going to work for $2.50.
That definitely is a major daily topic.
And it's not just here, it's employees all
Everywhere.
over.
Yeah.
State.
I don't wanna say it's the only issue, because I'm sure we would have members of the public who would volunteer to keep it open, and I still would then say to you, we're constrained by the governor's order, I can't have all those programs open back up in phase one, even if we were to have volunteers.
And there's no way to open up some of the bathrooms still, or we'll put porta potties out there for the free play that you're having outside now?
The bathrooms could open back up in phase one. We instead said, let's do them in phase two, because right now GBSA, they're the ones who are using the field, they're paying to keep the bathrooms open. But we could go ahead and open the bathrooms now. I knew that was gonna be a conversation. You had brought it up to us before, and so.
I think we should at least have the restrooms by the basketball and tennis courts open, and the ones down by the boat ramp open. Even if we have to pay extra to have them clean.
We can do that. That's not as much a critical issue for us, so this is our recommendation, but that's not a critical impact to staff if we were to open this now.
So we would have staff, because we would still need staff available at those locations.
Right, I'll just tell you, I mean, I've watched public hearings in Okaloosa about whether to open bathrooms or not, so we're not gonna spend an hour debating bathrooms as I've seen other local governing boards do it. They're talking about how do we keep the group to 10 or less, and so right now, it's put on the sports association. I said that what Santa Rosa and Okaloosa are saying is, how do you keep bathrooms to 10 or less? Well, we can't do it, so we're going to then delegate that authority and liability to the sports association. That's why they're doing that during phase one. So that means it then becomes our responsibility to make sure that there's groups of 10 or less in the bathroom. We'll put up a sign.
If we have some people in those bathrooms.
Right, there's,
Can't get to the people in those
I don't think
bathrooms.
you probably could do that.
no. So I don't wanna,
I know.
if it's important to you, we'll do it.
Okay.
We'll find it.
I think at least those.
Okay.
In areas that we may not have any control, let's say they decide to allow the Blue Angels to fly. And what phase would we be in? Would we be in three?
Two.
We're still in two.
According to this, it's phase two.
Because it's what, the 12th?
Can I just make a point? This does not, the governor will determine when we go into the next phase. What we're saying here is that, subject to his determination, these are things we will do. not dates at which we absolutely know will be in phase two. We anticipate and hope by that time we're in phase two, but it will be the governor who determines when we're in phase two or phase three.
All this could move up based on the date the government projects.
We would bring it back to you if we could not accomplish, let's say tomorrow, and we talked about that because it happens.
Yeah.
Let's say tomorrow the governor says we are now in phase two.
Exactly.
Well, what I would say, you've already given me authorization to open the summer camp July 1. And so then Ron and I would have to figure out, how quick can we do that? And I would just advise you of it, since you authorized us to do it, I would let you know how much sooner we could accomplish it.
Right, and one thing we put into the resolution that the city manager, would have, options to modify the plan, reporting those modifications to the council, so that if, you want to ask for a meeting and say, no, we don't want to do that, discuss it further in the meeting, you could do so, but it gives her some ability to adjust it one way or the other, depending on what's happening more globally. But this is kind of the outline of what is anticipated.
The best we can do, because the citizens are asking, and they're not satisfied when we say, we're waiting on the governor. So at least this gives them a blueprint of what we can do once these phases are declared.
And back to the range. Is that affects us up here just because of overcrowding in shoreline park areas like that. That's what I was wondering if they're still in phase two.
So the interesting thing, and this was very challenging, I promise you, staff was all sitting here with one of these doing this number. And what is apparent is that there are some items in phase two that the governor has pulled out and said are permissible, even though we right now are in phase one. And that certainly makes it more of a challenge for us when local governments are still constrained. But for instance, sporting events. Well, clearly sporting events, when you're talking about, Blue Wahoo Stadium and otherwise, are going to create a congregation of more than 50. And so that could happen with Blue Angels. That absolutely could. We could end up with a gathering more, and we will do our best to make sure that people stay a minimum 6 feet apart. We'll continue to communicate that, but in a lot of ways, we're responding to what the governor ordered. So we just have to wait and see.
I can tell you, Tom, when that boat ramp is done, I don't know if it ain't gonna get much more crowded.
When they're crowded in the water, that's not our.
I'm just saying,
Anymore.
trucks with trailers, there's not a whole lot more space, even with Blue Angels, there's just.
I've been down there.
Yeah, so it's,
Best show in town.
yeah, watch them come in, that's the best show in town.
Rather than out.
Mhm.
Okay, any other discussion?
Just one little question.
Okay.
In splash pads, do they consider the nature of splash pad, kids jumping around and grown-ups getting close and all that? Is there any concerns about splash pads in any of these spaces, this force?
There's been a lot of communication flow between us and other cities about splash pads. And so obviously our splash pad is in phase 3 for the reason that you just said. Our older population will not be kept away from watching their grandchildren on the splash pad. It was a very popular spot, and so it's in phase 3 for that reason. And again, we're not sure what that timeline would be, but our understanding is that's what most other cities are doing as well. Yeah.
I only have 10.
Speaking of the splash pad, has it been tested and checked out lately to make sure it works? And when the switch slips, we make sure it does work?
Have you heard
It's
a
been sitting
rumor?
off for a long time.
No, but last year it did that, remember we switched it on early, and the solenoids were all like, big or got struck by lightning and all that.
Council has got it rolled up for office and stuff.
Well, it's great. See you tomorrow. We'll check that out.
Okay, now, we've got a motion. Do we need to amend it in any way, or it's all fine? Do we have one? Okay, do we have a
Oh, we
motion?
do.
Yeah, and then with the bathroom and.
Yeah.
Moved as amended by the bathroom.
Bathroom with the ramp and about the
I'll second that, if, but I don't know.
Okay,
I think that was a motion.
Sounds
all
like
right, so we have a motion and a second. And Leslie, do we have any public, comments or questions? All right, thank you.
You got something?
No, I just want to make sure we had,
Oh,
we
can
request for,
check out the
like,
flash
for
page, too.
comments on.
Okay. But thank you, thank you. All right, so at this time, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. All right, next we have got the consent agenda, and, do we have anyone who would like to have any items pulled from the consent agenda? All right.
Move for approval, consent agenda items alpha and bravo.
Second.
And we have a second. All right, Leslie, do we have any comments from the audience? All right, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any, all in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. Our, action item, our first action item is the City Hall exterior column repair project. Awarded that bid. Samantha?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. These are the type of bid awards that we'd like to see. This is for necessary structural repair to our concrete pillars at City Hall. The original probable cost estimate when preparing the budget last year was $200,000. Ultimately, when the project was designed and bid, the winning bid this evening is to Alvera Company for $129,529. And we ask for approval and authorization for the mayor to sign the agreement.
Do we have any public comment on this item? All right. Council, do we have a motion and a second?
Move to approve. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Item B is the fuel system removal and replacement project award bid. Samantha?
Thank you. The council budgeted $25,000 for this project, again, in preparing the budget last year. The capital budget for this department includes $25,000 for fuel tanks and $250,000 for the bathroom renovation and column repairs. The total of the bids received for these three projects is $270,311. Therefore, the budget is sufficient to cover all three projects without a budget amendment. The staff recommends that council approve the award to Palisades LLC for $62,533 to complete the fuel system removal and replacement project and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public comment? All right, do we have a motion and a second?
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, we have a move for approval and a second. Any discussion from council? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. 5-0. At this time, we will move on to new business, and I'll turn that over to Mary Jane on that.
Yes, we have one item that we wanted to get some direction from the council for bringing it back to you. Leslie has been in touch over the last several weeks with supervisor of elections, Santa Rosa County, Tucky. Belaine, as you know, she is the one who handles our ballot and putting on our elections. In discussions with her, Leslie learned that, of course, we all know, they know that the primary election date has been moved up to August 18th. And so, the elections office will begin immediately preparing for the general election in the fall, and there are still a lot of unknowns about that. She has, though, decided that the date for submitting ballot information, so the candidates' names and all, needs to be moved up, and the deadline is now August 21st. The reason for that is because they anticipate that there's going to be a large request for vote by mail, and they're not, there are other things about the fall election that are uncertain due to the COVID situation. And so again, to be sure that ballots are ready and that she can respond, get the vote by mail ballots out in a timely manner. August 21st at noon is the deadline that we would have to submit our candidate information to her to go on the ballot. The problem for us is that our qualifying period begins on the first Monday in August, so August 3rd, and then ends on the Friday for Labor Day, September 4th. So we have to change our qualifying period for this election. And in looking at that, Leslie did some research, has reached out to other cities, and has found that our qualifying period is a bit longer than most. Most cities, she found, have a 1 week qualifying period. There's some that might have 2 weeks, 7 days, some are even only 5 days. In fact, I think you said the majority of those that responded to your questions said 5 days. So, then the question becomes, do you want to do a one-time change? And I think we could fit it, it would qualify to do it on a temporary basis through an emergency resolution. However, the statute says that you set the qualifying period by ordinance. So then we started talking about it, and we wanted to get direction from you. Do you want to go on and entertain an ordinance that would change our qualifying period on a permanent basis to make it more consistent with what other cities are doing? If we do that, we probably will have to have a special meeting just to get the second reading in, because we will have to have that done by the end of June in order to, be able to get the qualifying period, get all the communications and notice out there as to when qualifying will begin and moving it forward and implementing it. But again, we have no choice but to do something to change it for this election. So we wanted to pose it to you, as do you want to go on and consider changing it on a more permanent basis?
I would say probably change it permanently, just so we don't have to, go back and revisit it, since it's ultimately what we're gonna need to do anyway. And I guess that, in my opinion, would be the direction to go, and thus the scheduling of the special meeting would be upon.
So what's the 5 days, 7 days, is there a suggestion here?
I think that's up to you. Again, what Leslie saw in her research is, anywhere from 5 days to 14 days was kind of the norm.
We still don't need the final electors signed.
Well, that's also an issue, that the 5 electors, or the 5 signatures on the 5 petitions is something that's set by our charter, and it was one of the points of discussion that, was, the Charter Review Committee was reviewing. That is actually contrary to the state statute on petitions. The petitions require that you have 3% of your electorate or registered voters, is it?
Actually, the statute states that to qualify, you pay, qualifying fee of 3% of your annual salary. Or, that's 5.
3 cents?
5, 1%.
1%.
You have to obtain 1%, of your registered voters in your geographical area. And ours is 5,216, which would equate to 53. Most people are gonna pay the 3 cents. Yeah.
And I think a lot of candidates do want to get their campaign off by getting the petition signed and avoiding the fee, which is much higher in most places. We do need to change that, but right now the state statute, is the governing, so such for 3 cents if you're playing run and collecting it, so we're sure that we're doing that properly.
What is our qualifying period right now?
Begins the first Monday in August and ends on the Friday before Labor Day. So the dates this year are August 3rd through September 4th. So that would put us beyond the deadline for the ballot.
I would say, yeah, everybody else is good with it. Back it up in a reasonable time period of 2 weeks, something like that.
7 days, 10 days?
Yeah.
10 business days.
Okay. So we'll bring back an ordinance to that fact. Is there and again, we can present it to you, but again, is there a sense of whether you prefer the 2 week, keep consistent with, we have had a longer period, or do you want to shorten it, we have to shorten it some.
To be consistent, let me ask Leslie, what would, the county supervisor of elections, would they have an opinion, would they like for us to be consistent with everyone else?
My conversations was that we have the longest qualifying period than anyone, and that it would, be better that we were consistent, and shorten our qualifying period, because it has been an issue since I've been here handling elections. We've had to change the qualifying period, at least twice. We had to do it twice in 2016, and it's just an issue that we continue to have, with the supervisor of elections because of issues that come up and the way our qualifying period is. I did send out, an email to all the city clerks in the state of Florida, and based on my research, 90% came back at 5 qualifying days. There was a few with 14 and a few with 7. So, but based on Ms. Blaine's conversation, it would be best that we did shorten ours. She didn't have an opinion as far as 5 or 10 days, but that was our conversation.
Business days.
I second.
So 10,
Seven
seven
business
business
days.
days, 7 business days. All right.
Which would be like 10 days.
Yeah.
No,
Was there a vote?
We don't need to.
We don't need to vote yet, so we'll bring it back in the form of an ordinance for first reading at the June 15th meeting, and then, the recommended date for the special.
The special meeting would need to be the Monday, or not Monday, I think it's June 29th, I believe it is, if you wanna.
In order to get the notice requirements. So, does anyone know of any conflicts of having a meeting on June 29th?
we've all been off for 2 months, so we have nothing.
We're not going on vacation.
It's in our regular time at 5:30.
Yeah, it's a special.
Is it a Monday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so.
You couldn't do it like
Early.
20 minutes in advance of the regular meeting.
As long as it's after 5 o'clock, we sure can do it. So we can do it at 5 o'clock if you'd like. It's just that we have, when we approve the ordinance, it has to be after.
Your next regular meeting is the 15th, and you don't have to have 14 days between first and second reading.
10 days notice, so by the time it gets in the paper, which will be the 18th, it has to have a 10-day, and 10 days would be, the 28th or the 29th. So, yeah,
Are you going?
You want to go or anyway?
Well, if we're still in this, participate remotely, we're still in the,
Yeah, we could go from the phone.
yeah,
if we're still in this.
Yeah.
well, it's through July 7th, I believe.
Well, we may need to make a meeting together.
I was in the
And
meeting. I was,
in the audience, in the public. Okay, in the discussion on that, we're all good? All right, and then, we will now move to public forum, and so do you have any contact with the audience?
Just double checking, no, I've not received anything.
All right, hearing, nothing then for public forum, we will go on to council comments, and let's start with Councilman Schmidt.
I'm good.
All right, Councilman Schmidt.
I just wanted to get feedback from the group here, Samantha, on the persistency that we seem to be seeing with our water pipes failing. You know, this event that we had over the weekend seems pretty routine, you know, and it happens a lot. Tom educated us that, you know, and Sam, that the pipes themselves are good for 10 to 20 years, and these are 50 years old. So I'm curious what we have to do to make that a bigger priority for replacement, so that we're not constantly behind on this issue.
Yeah.
And it creates a lot of disruption for people, you know, when their water shuts down.
When you have, deferred maintenance, there's always gonna be the commodities.
Right.
It is going to be more expensive, and so, I think for members, of the council who are new this year, it now is crystallizing the budget that was adopted last year that set in motion that plan of action. You have budgeted for a GIS coordinator for the first time in the city's history. And that position is going to be responsible for mapping the utilities within the city. Part of that mapping, it's not just a sketch, it's attaching information to that map so that our people out in the field can use this and they can see what the age is and they can see where all of those joint connections are. And it saves us, time and money, locating an issue when there is a failure, but also it is step number one to having a proper maintenance plan in the future. And so that is very important, but even once you have that information, you've got to then be able to fund that improvement plan. In your growing service area, in the SSRU, you already have SCADA on most of your lift stations. The failure last weekend was on water, not sewer. But I can't emphasize enough how important SCADA is for any modern utility, because right now, we are utilizing staff people who their only job, essentially, unless something fails, it is to go around and check all of those lift stations and manually operate them. So you then are really entering the modern age when you're able to do that remotely and make those adjustments remotely. We don't have a SCADA funding schedule for inside the city the way that we do outside the city. We have been talking a lot this year about the business plan for South Santa Rosa utility versus inside the city that was created over 20 years ago. And as infrastructure is aging inside the city and you continue to have unprecedented growth in your service area outside the city, does it now make sense to look at a restructuring of that business plan? And so it's not a magic wand kind of solution. Number one, you've got to make sure you accurately mapping and inventorying what we have in the ground. We continue to be surprised, like what we saw this weekend. I'd love to say that happened before the city incorporated. That kind of a botched job. Part of the problem is that should have never been done that way to begin with. How many of those situations are we going to find? We don't yet know. But making sure that everything is to code obviously is of critical importance. On the sewer side, making sure that we have SCADA on lift stations. Also, that just needs to be part of a 5 to 10 year capital plan where every year in your budget you know how many SCADA systems you're purchasing until all 88 are outfitted. And so tomorrow we have a meeting with Raptelis, who you engaged at the beginning of the year. That rate study has cost almost $100,000. I want to remind you of that. It's a very expensive rate study because we're asking them to do a very complex thing. We have been working with them, I'm trying to find the words to reflect how much time we have spent with them. So they really know the ins and outs of our utility, what our capital improvement plans are moving into the future, and we're really excited about meeting with them tomorrow. So we'll be going through all of that in anticipation of having some budget work sessions with you. And really, this is the start of the next 20 to 25 years, how you'll be developing a new business plan for inside the city limits, making sure that you have all those things properly scheduled.
Keep in mind also that those lines connecting the city and our side of Everport, those lines are just about as old as anything in the city.
Yeah. I can't say enough how much we appreciate that the council are not being driven by political decisions. Your motivations are not to keep rates artificially low and punt the issue to the next council. You have done an excellent job at asking what is the responsible thing to do, what are the options available to us. The great news is that you serve 11% of the county in an area that is a growing population. And so you have options available that don't necessarily mean a significant rate increase. It just means we need to look at how we're doing things and go about doing them differently. For instance, maybe we need to restructure our volumetric rate. When you haven't looked at, a rate study since 2014, are we charging our commercial and industrial customers the same as what they would be paying, in other areas of the county? And so it may end up being a benefit to our residential customers that we're looking to do things differently and also make sure that we're properly funding these capital improvements.
All right, thank you.
If anybody has trouble remembering what SCADA stands for, then I do. Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition Control System.
I think we all need that.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Get into that.
Yeah, get into that.
I have trouble with acronyms, so I have to write it down.
All right, Councilman Neal. Actually, Mayor Christian.
I guess it's okay to tell about my conversation with Wade.
Please.
You saw the email about the school board asking us to move the date 2 months. I didn't see any reason for the first communication. I called Wade, and she in turn did not know about it, other than the fact that it was going to be on the agenda for this coming Thursday. School board. Anyway, she did check it out. She talked with Joey Harrell, and all their intentions are still the same. But, in waiting for the Board of County Commissioners to approve the conditional use, they had to hold off on doing some studies and plans on the easements and different areas like that. They're just concerned at this point that our due diligence time would run out if we stayed at the June timeframe. Just to give themselves a little time, if we wanted to extend it over to August to make sure all the bases are still on track. Apparently, I did advise them that they could have put a little bit of, like, added one sentence to all that and figured this out.
So, that is a provision, they exercise the right that they have under the contract, it's not unusual in a commercial transaction like this where additional time is needed, just to, make sure everything's in order, on the provider side, and they had that right, so, it was yes, it was just a, very painful, but, sufficient notice to us, so, we were all wondering, but it happens, it was their right to do so.
Feedback from Way was that the school board, at least in the majority, but not the entirety, is very much into this, very much wants it to happen.
Councilman Henry.
I got a question, can we discuss the Chamber of Commerce a little bit? About their, having to move out of their building? Does the school board actually have a contract on that building for sale? Or did, what is the, reason to have to
The
move out?
arrangement, and I would need to brush up on my history, so maybe while I'm doing that, I'll send out the lease agreement to all of the council. But the property is obviously owned by the school board, and it was originally leased to the city to be the offices for, CTA, our natural gas division, and also provide space for the historic commission as well as the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah.
A lot of stuff in one building.
Yes, and so the city went about making, improvements and repairs to the building, but the Chamber of Commerce needed quite a bit of space. And so, one after another, everyone else looked for different accommodations until the chamber remained. By the conditions of the lease agreement, if there is a leak, if there, any type of routine repair before the subleasee were to call someone, they call us first, and seek approval. And so, most of the time, because we're responsible for that repair as the leasee to the county, we do it in-house rather than hire it out because we pay that bill. And that's been the arrangement for quite some time. In addition to that, through tourism development dollars, of course, we, we support the chamber. And then also we're members of the chamber as well. So that's the arrangement between the city, the Chamber of Commerce. I do know that they have a 5-year strategic plan because they have shared that with the council in the past. I don't know where they are with a capital drive. Kristen Rhodes, the CEO of the chamber, advised me about 6 months ago that they were looking to move to a place further in Greater Gulf Breeze. They're at the Greater Gulf Breeze Chamber of Commerce. But this year's president, Mr. TJ Edwards, reached out and asked me recently if I knew of any office space, if I could assist. And I asked what the progress had been on the other building, because prior to that, I had attempted to facilitate conversations between Jacobs Chiropractic and the old SunTrust building, and then also the old CVS building, to see if there could be a build-to-suit arrangement. And just the lease rates did not work for the chamber. And so Mr. Edwards shared with me that the opportunity down the highway did not pan out. So I don't think that they have an option right now. I do know in talking with the school board's realtor, he does have an interested party, and he has asked us for more information about the utility lines that we have in close proximity to make sure that that won't be in opposition to who their, potential buyer would be. I don't have any more information than that.
I just don't know if they have any funding draws in place for that, and I know in participating in some of the meetings that I'm going over their financials, they're really on a very tight sheet. I don't know if they can really afford to. I was just curious if they didn't have a particular buyer, to see if the school board would entertain extending the lease, so they would at least have a place to stay for another 5 years and try to create some method of funding for a future place. Or is it possible?
I really, unfortunately, have not been involved at all in their capital finance. I do know the overall growth inside the county has been 1.9%. Within our service area, between us and Navarre, the growth has been, 22%. I do know that 2 years ago, they restructured their membership rate so that the membership fee is more proportionate to the number of employees that you have. But I don't know within that Greater Gulf Breeze area, what their target membership is. So we can invite maybe to a future meeting the CEO or the board president to kind of more talk out with the city what their vision is for new accommodations.
Yeah, 'cause that kind of fit, they're running out of time, and I don't think they got a place to go. I hate to see it in homeless.
Yeah.
I think that's what they have. Their year ends are usually in a negative range.
How many staff members do they have?
Hmm?
How many staff do they have?
One or two or three. One just left. I think they're down to. Anyway, I knew they do have a little bit of payroll involved, but they just really reduce how, I hate to see them lose out. I just didn't know what the school board's intention was, if there was, that would be a property that the city would be interested in buying or switching over or something, the school board.
I think
With
I
if
asked
that's
once,
property that we have, I don't know.
I think I did ask once if they would donate it to us, and they're definitely not.
They weren't interested in donating. That would have been nice if we could, get the school board to donate it to, nice event, a corporation like that, help the chamber. But, 'cause I mean, they're out there helping everybody else, it's like, kind of like everybody needs to kind of chip in and help them out.
Okay, well, I think that would be great if we got someone representing our tip out.
The future agenda.
Yeah, that would be a thing. The last,
I was reminded during the phone call with Wade that that property is for sale.
You know, there were,
Far as I know, there's no price tag on it.
What is it worth?
They wouldn't share the appraisals with us, but I was in the meeting when Mayor Fitch asked for the property to be donated. It was a non-starter, I think is a fair enough. Even we talked about other types of arrangement, like, we could, purchase, rehab, resell, or we would build a suit for you. Obviously, it's costing them money. And the utilities in close proximity make it a real challenge for us. The only thing that we would be able to use it for is what it is. We weren't able to make the police department fit, so we have no use for it personally. And the superintendent was not interested, basically everything we described is what the school board could already do. So I think he received it with a lot of mirth.
Yeah, I think we heard laughter.
Yeah, because
I don't wanna say that, but it was loud.
Serious response back to us.
Yeah, couldn't predicate that sale of the Tiger Point, the new school, maybe on land.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about enterprises, because that often is confusing for our citizens. We recently had, Mr. Jim Doyle ask why we couldn't use money from a water enterprise fund, for a pet project inside the city. And so for the school board sale, that will be a decision that the council will need to make. The SSRU has made a recommendation that go to pay off, debt service. But as we're looking at that future business plan, you may need to look again at that, if there are other benefits to the utility. And so that may be a conversation you again have with South Santa Rosa Utility. There is also anticipated with the sale of the East Course, a repayment of debt, one of which is the debt owed from South Santa Rosa Utility back to the general fund. That debt being repaid, the council has already earmarked as the funding plan for the police department. You have no other funding plan to expand the police department, which serves the overall area. So I don't have a funding plan for how we could provide $1 million to $2 million to the Chamber of Commerce, because we have been trying to brainstorm how we can provide for our police department. Yeah, that's our challenge. So that's why we're trying to think out of the box with the school board. And what's that?
I can't imagine spending that kind of money on a building for the chamber.
Yeah, no.
The
All
building
you're
that-
doing is trench rotting, you're not making them, putting them in another building. You don't make them any better off, because they're paying the minimum as far as building they're in.
They're paying nothing.
They're paying $1 a year.
They're paying, yeah,
They're
so-
paying $1 a year.
Right,
Yeah.
And we're doing all the repairs and probably paying all the utilities.
Right.
So, and it seems like at the time when it was for sale before, that was in the fours.
It's just like generation.
But they wanted to sue us for them to go to get new rent.
Yeah,
Like that was traded property anyway, some years ago, it was a trade-off between one of the businesses up at, Publix and so forth for that property, so that's how they got it.
If we had an old train depot or something somewhere, I would like to look at how we could, it's almost two different issues. How can we help the chamber versus what to do with that spot? That spot has a lot of challenges to it, or else the school board would have already done something with it.
Yeah, right.
It's almost easier to figure out how to help the chamber than it is to figure out what to do with that
But
spot.
with the new codes and everything,
Oh, yeah.
it's gonna be tough to put something there,
Exactly, it's almost worthless.
right? Even if you take the other
So
code
it'd be
and add
interesting to
it to
see what the appraised value of that property would have been. And I was gonna suggest the same thing, write a letter to the school board superintendent, ask them for a good faith gesture, give it to them. Which it can't work a whole lot.
Then, well, it should be appraisable. We could ask the realtor what he's
Yeah.
listing it for.
You still have the same issue.
Exactly.
And if it's worth $4 and they give it to us for $2, then we're paying $200,000 of Gulf Breeze citizens' money for a regional service called the Gulf Breeze Area Chamber, who's barely making it now on no net.
Right.
So I don't see how all that would come together regardless of what the price is.
Yeah. Be interesting to know what
Maybe
our
free would be a
chambers
struggle.
do.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I know, I'm just feel for them, but
So what do they need this space for? What do they do there?
Employees and meetings.
Yeah, I guess they have, well, right now they're doing these Zoom meetings, so I haven't been able to participate in it.
I'm just
But
curious.
they
Yeah.
just have staff.
I mean, I don't see a whole lot of tourists going there
Yeah.
and picking up, it's not like the Navarre one.
Right.
It seems like they could have different businesses that are part of the chamber, just host different events inside their business after hours.
Yeah.
You know, if push come to shove.
20 people in there.
Sir?
The boardroom has room for.
Yeah.
20.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but there's a lot of businesses that could
Yeah.
easily accommodate
Yeah,
that in
yeah,
after
yeah.
hours.
We got the
Great
community center
idea.
here.
Yeah, they always rent that or give it to them.
Yeah.
But I was just curious.
Suggestion.
No? Oh, wait. Or here's a nice room right here.
Well, if we're paying for the repairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
cheaper.
Yeah, it might be cheaper in the long run.
I would have seniors and tennis players and judges, I'd be willing to.
Well, I asked about the community center, you said you've got it well skewed.
And that's
But it's part of the
all.
CRA, couldn't that part of the CRA be part of that to help out?
And so when we talk about helping, again, it's easier to not talk about that space because I really have stretched my imagination and I've got a pretty good imagination and I'm not coming up with much for that spot. As it relates to the CRA, it's really gonna come down to the fact that you're talking about undergrounding utilities for, our community resiliency, and that is gonna take all the money that is unencumbered. Again, you're talking about something in today's, dollars, that is, you're talking about $1 million price tag at least. If you're talking about using CRA money in order to pay the salary of staff, you're already doing that with TDC dollars. You
Yeah.
pay a significant portion of the salary for the staff at the chamber already.
What do we
Through
do?
TDC.
What do we, 15,000? What does the TDC give?
Can I refresh my memory and get that to you?
But I didn't mean to
Yeah.
drag on, but that's what I wanted to ask about that. So.
Okay, all right. I think that said, one thing I was just gonna mention, I know all of us have probably been glued to our TVs, for days and nights now, just following the event from last week. And I don't know, I've made several trips, back and forth under 17th Avenue and one under the trestle. And last weekend, when I guess was the first one I made, and I saw the huge crowd that was like, uh-oh. And so I was somewhat apprehensive, but I would just like to compliment those who participated in that and have every day out in the heat, in the evening. And they've been so polite, anything that I've heard has just been a chant for the right reason. They wave, the artwork is phenomenal, I think. And I'm just so grateful that that's what we're experiencing with this. And it's something where we can actually stay focused on what happened as opposed to what is happening wrong here. I just think as all humans, we're all created equal, and we need to be treated equally all the time, anywhere. And the prejudice and, I guess, just disrespect for anybody just is very upsetting. And I think one thing, in our community that I have felt, in fact, I think I read next door thing a few weeks ago, and it was what we like about Freeze, and there were several comments, but on 2 or 3 of them, it was the feeling of community. Somebody felt like they had moved to a little village, and I just hope that what last week brings and George Floyd's death is something that it will bring us all together more and to learn and to think about being more accepting and respectful of every single person everywhere all the time. So, all right, I think with that, we're adjourned.
Good job.